Next time on the Totally Unreal Book Club podcast, Will, Caitlin, and Steve, along with special guest Kyle Hebert, discuss the single most important book in the entire universe. Next time, as in right now, today.
Welcome to the Totally Unreal Book Club podcast, or TUBC for short. This podcast is in association with and comprised of the Voices of Anarchy, Improv comedy group, and we are here to discuss our favorite totally unreal books, movies, video games, etc. on a weekly basis.
This book club is totally unreal.
I'm your host, Willwood, and at the table today we have, starting to my left, Caitlin Dawkins.
I went to a really emotional wedding the other day. Even the cake was in tears.
Steve Marriott.
The periodic table of elephants is much shorter than the original periodic table of elements.
And our very special guest, an awesome voice actor. You've heard him in Street Fighter as Ryu, as Gohan and the narrator in Dragon Ball Z. He's in, that latest Danganronpa 3. He plays the guy in purple. What's his name?
Kaito Momota.
Kaito Momota.
Cool.
Yeah, he's the G. Just like the G here, Kyle Hebert.
Milk comes from cows.
That is a true fact. You can look that shit up, and you can take it to the bank. I don't know what they'll do with it, but you can do it.
I don't think the bank accepts milk.
I don't know.
I haven't
Couldn't hurt to try.
Have you ever tried to bring milk to the bank, Kyle?
I have not. I am kind of concerned with everyone's allergies. Will they pull the whole lactose intolerant thing? Or are they going to say, no, I need coconut milk or almond milk or nut milk? And then I just snicker because that sounds really obscene.
See, that's a good point. You're much more considerate than we are. But I will say we've been drinking cashew milk lately. And it's not because we don't support cow tit milk, but it's that the calories are much lower and it lasts a lot longer in the fridge, which is nice.
It makes me feel better than drinking. Humans are not designed to drink milk in adulthood.
Oh, well, crap. But what I do have a question, though. On cashew milk, who is the poor sod who has to sit in a factory and squeeze all these cashews?
Prisoners.
Oh, well,
Little
of
assembly
course.
line, yeah.
That just makes too much sense.
Like, you think they're going to pick up highway litter or something. It's like, no, your community service is milking these cashews.
Squeeze these nuts.
Well, I mean, I would assume they're probably doing a variety of things. They might even find some cashews on the side of the highway.
That's where the best milk comes from, I hear.
The highway side cashews.
Highway cashews, yeah.
Freshly splat from all the cars running over it.
So as much as I'd love to continue on with this milk podcast, we should probably very, very quickly talk about what media we've consumed this week.
Well, we've been watching a lot of, and Kyle, you may not be familiar with this show, Dragon Ball Z Kai lately. No?
I've heard of it. It vaguely rings a bell.
Well, we started out watching the original dub, and I feel a little bad for betraying you. We switched over to Kai, which has a not as awesome narrator.
Yeah, the narrator.
But has half the amount of episodes and way less filler in it.
Oh, absolutely. That's what it's totally intended for. It's like, let's trim the filler. Let's just cut to the chase. The fights will be succinct. And, we'll just go from there.
I definitely miss the better narrator, though.
Thank you. Checks in the mail.
You. Thank
And
you.
it's made of milk.
That's right. Just don't take milk to the bank.
I've been playing the new God of War. Oh. It's very awesome, as everybody on the internet will tell you right now. Steve?
I auditioned for a trailer for the God of War thing. I didn't get the part, but it was kind of fun.
Nice.
I watched A Quiet Place the other day, which was really good.
Oh, we saw that too.
Yeah.
I really liked it.
It's very quiet in there. I tried to eat a crunchy snack, and I felt very guilty.
There was actually an article I read on IGN from John Krasinski telling people to feel bad if they make noise in that movie.
I almost brought carrots, and I thought that was just too ridiculous.
Or individually wrapped hard candies.
Yeah. Werther's Originals.
Yeah. Or the loudest chips bag in the world, Sun Chips.
Oh, God. So good, though.
Yeah.
I wish Dahi was here so we could listen to his weird Irish snacks that he would bring into the cinema. Kyle, what media have you consumed, and what media have you been in?
Well, geez. If you're in North America and you get the Cartoon Network, chances are Saturday night is the Kyle Hebert cameo night, because I do show up on JoJo's Bizarre Adventure as Kakyoin, Naruto Shippuden as Kiba and Inoichi, Dragon Ball Super as Adult Gohan, Dragon Ball Z Kai as Adult Gohan. I forget what else, but
they don't have the Ox King in Super at all, do they?
Well, he's there for a line or two, and he's usually in the background, not saying anything. He actually had more lines in Kai than he did in Super, but at least so far, anyway. I don't know. We're still in the midst of dubbing that. In terms of media, I personally consumed. Me and my beautiful wife saw A Quiet Place as well, and that was awesome.
Right?
Yeah. Also, just Netflix binged the new Lost in Space reboot, and gotta say, it's pretty entertaining. It's not great, but it's pretty solid. I mean, I think it's worth checking out.
I've seen you tweeting about that.
I laugh because I literally binged the entire season yesterday.
Yeah,
it was very good. Yeah,
exactly.
I've been watching season 2 of A Series of Unfortunate Events on Netflix, which somebody that we know is in season 3. But I don't think we're allowed to talk about it yet.
No, not yet.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump in to the actual podcast we're here to do, which, of course, is to talk about this week's book. And Kyle, as our special guest, I believe you picked the book this week.
I did, and I got to say, it is quite the read. It's called The Quimby Tapes, and this is by an author named Fielding Mellish.
Oh, that's a classic.
Right?
So good. Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. I had a hard time putting it down.
I like, sorry, go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I just want to see how everyone else feels. Do they feel like their life is literally transformed after partaking in this endeavor?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was really refreshing to finally read like a sci-fi book on this podcast that is about like outer space and spaceships and stuff like that. But also from like a children's perspective, which was a nice touch. Mm-hmm. I just felt it was interesting that the author Fielding Mellish, was it? Right.
Yeah,
yes.
Fielding Mellish.
Sorry. Yeah, it's it's spelled the way it's spelled, and so when I read it, I have to think about it. But yeah, I like how Mellish took this, like, your traditional tropey sci-fi, Star Wars, Star Trek kind of thing, Lost in Space, but set it like from the point of view of a 5-year-old. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
Right, and using antiquated older school media like tapes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, the big reveal at the end about who Quimby is, because, of course, I mean, I don't want to jump into spoilers too soon here, but it was a very, I liked it. I thought it was a good
heartfelt
read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an uplifting.
It was heartfelt. It also had some true strokes of horror in it,
as most children's books do.
Yes.
Followed immediately
the good
by
ones
comedy,
anyway.
which was a little bit of a sort of whiplash effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was sort of an emotional roller coaster. It kind of hit all the no romance though.
No, absolutely
No,
not.
that would be weird.
Kept it very platonic.
Yes.
Plutonic? No, wait.
Platonic.
That was when they visited Pluto.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
later.
it used to be platonic, but it's no longer classified as platonic.
Yeah, don't get me started on Pluto.
Right. And the platonic in the sense of, the old school, friend zone definition, which is just like, oh, I'm kind of sad because I like this person. They don't like me back, as opposed to the new generation, definition, which is, oh my God, you expect sex.
I've been nice to you and therefore you should have sex with me.
Right. Yeah. That is the current incarnation of the word friend zone.
Yes, and also the current definition of the planetoid Pluto.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Pluto was friend zoned, I guess, from the solar system.
That's
really
true,
was,
yeah. I mean, Pluto's like, hey, I'm relatively within your size space, and therefore I expect sex.
But it's wonderful how Fielding Mellish, of the world famous trapeze artist, the Mellishes.
Oh, yes.
He decided a different career path, but it was really cool to integrate the whole plutonic element to this sci-fi tropey masterpiece.
Yes, the element of plutonium was a very key element in many deaths and many survivals.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that.
It's true.
It ended some lives and it ended some half-lives as well.
Indeed. Oh, I'm really excited to jump into this book.
Joke.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else to say before we jump into spoilers?
Well, Caitlin, you were talking a few minutes ago before we started about how you just could not wait to read the back of the book.
Yeah, absolutely.
Would you care to do so?
Sure. It starts out, hey, fans. Do you like Ender's Game? Well, too bad. This is nothing like Ender's Game, except that there's a child who's narrating it. This book is all about making you feel things, and you will feel many things throughout reading this book, including possibly disgust. But you should read it anyway because it's really good. Thanks.
I like the little thanks at the end there.
Yeah.
It's like handwritten on there.
Yeah.
Little known fact is that Mellish actually personally wrote that on every copy of the book.
Very time consuming.
But he didn't use a permanent felt marker. So if you pick the book up by where it says thanks, you'll just rub it right off.
Yeah.
So some copies don't have the thanks, and it just comes off a little rude.
Well, it depends on like how careful they were at the bookstore. If they just were stacking them on the shelf, being aware of the fact that there's handwritten thanks, or if they just threw them on there, then a lot of them just smudged right off.
Yeah.
Yeah. You think a sci-fi novel is just going to be, a big thick tome, with a hardcover and all that, but this had that personal touch to it. A truly limited collectible edition that Fielding decided to, write such a personal, heartfelt back cover with thanks on the end.
Well, and the appreciation is actually language specific, like depending on what region the books were going to. Like it says gracias or merci or different.
Arigato.
Si.
Yeah. It's very hard to track down a copy of this book since Mellish didn't want to write out so many thanks. So he only published 12 copies of the book in every language.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is the ebook version, when you get to the back cover on the digital ebook version, he actually handwrote with an Apple Pencil. So you still have the handwritten element.
Yeah.
Well, I heard when the publishers first presented him the idea of using the tablet or the Kindle, that he tried to sign it with a regular pen because they hadn't used one before, and they got very frustrated with him.
Yeah,
and,
they kept having to buy new monitors because he would just write all over them.
And just before we jump into spoilers, I would also like to point out the fact that this book was written in 1731, and so I like how they digitally brought Mellish back to integrate him digitally with the Apple Pen.
Right.
That was a really neat touch that they did there.
Yeah, they actually wrote an entire AI program just to have Mellish sign.
And of course, he's succeeded by his long line of trapeze artist family members.
But the 1700s were huge for acrobats, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Again, this is also why he only published 12 copies of the book. because you put all the different languages together and people back there, and he covered most of his bases with like 96 copies of the book. So
yeah, I heard he had a lot of different books on the go at the time, but it was just too much of a juggling act, and it wasn't his forte, so he just decided to stick with the one.
Right. And it's really cool that was something this old, that they actually managed to find a perfectly preserved spleen of Mellish and keep it, in, like a trailer park ice chest, all these years.
yes, I agree.
Those trailer park ice chests are real efficient.
I also need to go back and, of course, I mentioned that this sci-fi had a lot of like the Star Wars Lost in Space tropes, but of course, what I meant is it inspired most of those
it created tropes. Yeah.
Well, something that old, yes, absolutely. When they say, "Oh, George Lucas is just ripping off Joseph Campbell or Akira Kurosawa," it goes so much
or David
further
D.
back.
Magic.
Yeah.
Well, I'm excited to get into spoilers. I really want to discuss this book.
Are we all ready to jump in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you have not yet read this book or been able to track down a copy, again, the book is The Quimby Tapes by Fielding Mellish. If you haven't read the book, skip now to the end of the podcast and we'll catch you next week. All right. Spoiler warning going up.
Warning. Incoming spoiler. Warning. Incoming spoiler.
Okay. Now we're in spoilers.
Okay. Deep breath, everybody. Okay. There's a young boy. His name is Quimby. And that's not like a surname or a Christian name. He's just named Quimby, at least for the purposes of this story.
It's like Cher.
And he has a really interesting sort of nervous tick. I don't know. It's kind of hard to describe. I mean, Will, maybe you can elaborate.
Yeah. I mean, it was, the way Mellish described it in the book was rather ambiguous, but what I got from it was that every time he took a step, he just sort of had to punch himself in the face.
I believe this actually was where the Monty Python Silly Walk, the Bureau of Silly Walks, originated, this idea.
Wow,
That
so
makes
comedy
sense.
Pop culture started in 1731.
Yeah.
Hard to believe, but
I
it's
mean,
true.
you can't make this stuff up.
No.
Oh, God, no. No. This is the work of a genius. I mean,
So
yes,
of course-
not only did he punch himself in the face, he would just, respond to everyone when they say, "Hey, Quimby." And then he'd turn around and just go,
Yes,
like
of course,
that
he could speak perfect English.
Yeah.
That was just his chosen nomenclature for greeting.
I also like that in an effort to try and get his tics under control, he decided to, he went and bought some tape and taped his hands to his side, which was the origin of the Quimby Tapes. However, then he documented his life after that.
Exactly. That is where he got the name, because he found that different types of tape, very hard to come by different types of tape. But of course, this book was written in 1731, but it takes place much, much later.
Right.
In 1735. So,
All the spaceships have been invented.
according to him, back then, he thought there would be all this stuff
Tape
in only
technology.
4 years.
Yeah.
So really, in a lot of ways, his vision for the future was off by a couple hundred years, but incredibly accurate by today's standards, depending on how we interpret it.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
It's a perfect way to sum it up.
I feel Mellish felt that covered all bases moving forward.
Yeah.
So should we start at the start of the book and kind of work our way through again? It seems to be how we've been doing it the last while. And
So as Kyle mentioned, the book is, and as you also, the back of the cover mentioned, is narrated from Quimby, about the Quimby tapes. Starts out as the tapes that he used to tape his hand down to stop him from punching in the face, but quickly evolves into something much grander. He starts on Earth, as you do.
as you do.
And he's 5 years old, and he gets up in the middle of the night to go visit his father, who is often in his workshop in the middle of night, working. So Quimby would often come
And
down.
of course, his father was a puppet maker.
Yes, of course.
Yes.
He was. I forgot about that until you just mentioned it.
Yes.
Now I remember.
I'm pleased to remind you.
Yes. So he would make puppets, and Quimby would come play with the puppets because they were his only friend.
Well, especially his dad loved that he would play with the puppets at first when he noticed that he had the tic, and he would put the puppet on, and the puppet just acts so erratic and he couldn't control it. And the puppet was punching him in the face, and he thought, you know what? I've got a great traveling show right here.
Yeah, and that's the origin of Punch and Judy.
Punch and Judy.
Yeah.
Punch and Judy the puppet.
She
Punch and Judy the puppet
she is
show.
very
Oh, the
important.
puppet show.
Yeah.
Right.
The puppet show, is very important later on. Kyle, would you like to take it from here?
Well, then we're introduced to this interesting time-traveling hip-hop DJ element.
Yes.
It sounds
I
crazy.
loved when that happened.
It
I
didn't
know it
feel
sounds-
anachronistic at all. I loved that bit.
Yeah. So this DJ comes from the future, goes back to the 1700s, and says, hey, yo, 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 yo. And Quimby's just like,
As a greeting.
right,
And of course,
right.
continues
and
to talk in perfect
He
English.
thinks that maybe he came from the skies, that he's an alien, because, obviously a hip hop DJ is going to wear some pretty rad clothing that's going to look completely like culture shock in the 1700s.
I also like how Fielding totally predicted what a DJ was
What hip hop
back in
was?
the 1700s. He was maybe the most single influential person in human history. And unfortunately, almost nobody knows about him because he only published 96 copies of this book, of which we own 42.
That's fast math.
Yeah, it's pretty wild because this hip hop DJ is not only speaking a foreign language and not only dressed completely alien to Quimby's surroundings, but he's introducing new technology to the old world. Well, there is no technology.
Yeah.
Also
Including much better tape.
Yeah, and also introducing all of this to the minds of his readers over the next 200 years.
Yeah,
Pretty much
it's pretty wild.
Pretty much everything we take for granted can be linked back to Fielding Mellish.
Including granite. Countertops.
Well, I don't want to take that for granted.
The DJ had very expensive tastes, and he introduced a little Quimby to granite countertops. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And duct tape, as I said.
Duct tape.
Yes.
So, of course, the DJ vanishes as quickly as he arrives, and that's why Quimby goes down to talk to his dad and to see the puppet show that night,
Which he was a part of.
which he was a part of. But
Punch and Judy.
his father, Quimbor, had mysteriously vanished along with all the puppets, and left in its place was a note that said, "Gone to space."
Be back soon.
Wow. So Quimby, being 5 years old, is saying, "What the hell is space? I don't even
And
grasp
also was a
this
very
concept."
good reader.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good reader for 5.
But, he did have a little trinket left over from the time-traveling hip-hop DJ, and that was a nice set of headphones.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
He
which
didn't know what to do with those. He thought they were butt warmers.
He did.
Yeah. So he put the cord end up his nose and the headphones on his butt.
Which, unbeknownst to him, was exactly how you activated the spaceship mode of these headphones.
Yeah.
It was like a little jetpack that like a Iron Man thing where you sit on it and it just kind of engulfs you in the headphone jetpack suit.
Yeah, it sort of worked
Yes.
a little like a reverse fart.
Please elaborate.
where you just kind of suck it in and off you go.
So, yeah, he accidentally sucked the headphones into his butthole and activated the suit.
And off he went.
Off he went to Pluto, in fact.
That was his first stop on his intergalactic tour.
And he's searching for
track
Dad,
down-
Dad, where's all the puppets? Or in his own speak.
It was, we find out later that was an actual language that Quimby had made up. And, he was trying to make it take, but of course it didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when he gets to Pluto and he finds his dad is there on the spaceship, and it's quite a large spaceship, then this is obviously where they set off on their journey through the galaxy. But his dad had set up a little booth, like, on reality shows where you go in, you'd be like, I'm a little pissed at Jenny today. She's been kind of a bitch. But obviously
The
this
video
is,
diary booth.
that's, I'm sad that I had to use a weird reality TV show example to explain what I was trying to say. But anyways, so Quimby goes in and he finds this one and, decides to start documenting their journey. But the first documentation was obviously just his telltale noise. Kyle, if you would be so kind. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the one.
And that's the second Quimby Tapes. The eponymous Quimby Tapes.
Mm-hmm.
The first one being the tape that he used to tape his hands, the second one being the video diaries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
and then that was amazing because reality TV was also invented.
Yeah. Mellish is so unknown for how much he invented and created and foretold.
He's the very definition of a pioneer, and he also coined the definition for pioneer.
Yes.
That's true. They'll say like Arthur C. Clarke in 2001: A Space Odyssey sort of predicted where technology went with iPads and such, but it all goes back to Mellish.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's unfortunate that so many people have not read this book due to its extremely rare existence. But we have it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and,
good on
and it
us.
was really interesting that I went on like audible.com's website and I downloaded the audiobook just to see how it compared, and it was actually read in Quimby's original language. So it was like
By the Mellish
48
AI,
hours
yeah.
solid of
Well, you can buy a dictionary to translate Quimby's language, so you can use that to kind of like enjoy it.
I should also
audiobook.
bring up for everybody listening, the reason why Kyle is so good at this is because I believe, Kyle, that you actually narrated that book.
Well, I did. I did have to go and study in the Andes Mountains with some Tibetan monks that ritualistically shaved kiwi fruit on Tuesday evenings at 7. And
They flew you in and out, right?
well, yeah. I was an honorary member, and I decided to keep my head shaved bald in honor of that. Actually,
That makes sense.
Actually, the bald look was another thing that Mellish brought up in his book, because I believe prior to 1731, no one had ever done it.
Yeah.
And then shortly after 1731, you just see it all throughout history.
Yeah, because Quimby and Quimbor were both bald.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because Quimby was born with a rare defect
Alopecia?
where, well, sort of, but slightly different.
Scalpopecia.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Alopecia just on your scalp.
Yeah. He still had full eyebrows
Yeah.
and a full beard at
Which was
5.
strange for a 5-year-old.
Yeah. It was part of the condition.
yeah. Going through puberty at such an early age, it's
Might have been a side effect from the space travel, but we don't know. They didn't really get into that. They didn't actually explicitly say if he had the beard and the shaved head before he got to space. They just kind of mentioned it afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's left up to interpretation, but ultimately I don't think it really changes the outcome of anything.
right, yeah.
But it
So,
did
I mean, I know-
inspire
I know that
look
with today's technology, it would take years just to get to Pluto. But this being the 1730s and Quimby and Mellish being so far ahead of his time, obviously,
It took him 4 hours.
Took some risks, I guess.
Yeah.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are in many ways, yes, he's inspired much of what we have today, but we are still a long ways off from catching up to Mellish's ultimate
Light years,
prediction.
perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
The
I mean-
scientists call it the Mellish threshold.
That's also-
too.
Yes, and the Mellish threshold is also ultimately responsible for the latest Twitter fad of kids trying to fart headphones up their butt to launch into space.
Reverse fart.
Yeah, to reverse fart.
Yeah.
So that also links back to Mellish as well. And I
Yeah.
would just like to take this moment to say, kids, please don't reverse fart your headphones. It's lethal.
It is not going to work.
Yeah.
This is a fictional book. Please keep that in mind.
And don't put the cord end up your nose. That's also a really bad idea.
I mean, it is fiction ultimately, but it can,
inspirational.
yeah, you can see how people would be confused by how accurate it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Most of
because
it.
it blurs the line between sci-fi and sci-truth.
Science.
That's right. No, well, sci-fi for the fiction,
Yeah.
and then truth for the non-fiction.
truth,
Yeah, absolutely.
Sci-non-fi.
Yeah,
Nah, I like sci-truth more.
that's another Mellishism.
Yeah.
Sci-truth. But we should continue on with the outline here.
Yeah, so they're on Pluto, and Quimby has just recorded his first video diary about finding Quimbor and the search for the puppets, because of course on Pluto all inanimate objects become animate and sentient. So the puppets had gained sentience and run off and created their own society. So Quimbor and Quimby had to go try to find the puppets.
Well, there were 8 different puppets that in the show that ran off to the 8 different remaining planets, not including Earth, but including Pluto.
Gotcha.
At
Yeah.
the time. And so they had each created their own civilization on each planet.
Yeah.
And so it was Quimby's job, along with Quimbor up until his untimely passing, to travel to each planet, infiltrate each society, and rip down their government from the inside, while leaving a tape for himself so he remembered which planets he'd already been to.
Yeah.
Right. Documenting his adventures on every planet.
So that's the third Quimby Tapes.
Right.
Yeah, so he-
was there a piece of the duct tape which was keeping him from punching himself also left as a souvenir?
Yes.
Yes, it was left as a souvenir on his arm.
Plus,
Yes.
he also ripped a
Okay,
little
I was
piece
a
of
little
duct tape.
fuzzy on that, but
Yeah.
I knew that if other people read it, I'd be able to think. I was like, I could have sworn I read a paragraph in the Quimby tapes that suggested that because of the distance involved, that the atmosphere or lack thereof on Pluto caused the duct tape to become recordable media.
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Mellish predicted like tape recording.
We didn't just predict it. He made it happen.
Yeah.
One thing that I love about this podcast and about this book club in particular is that sometimes when we discuss the book, it really feels like we read it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes a book
Like
isn't
we lived
real
it.
until you discuss it.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
I know.
Yes.
You don't need to tell me that, Steve.
So, they're on Pluto, and they need to find the king of the puppets on Pluto, Goofy, King Goofy of Pluto.
Again, inspired Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And later on the next planet, we get to the dog puppet Donald.
Oh, you're getting way ahead of us here.
I know, but I just wanted to, because people get a little confused. Of course, it would be way too plagiaristic if Disney kept the dog named Goofy and the duck named Donald, so he just reversed those.
Right. So we've got the duck puppet named Goofy. That
Yeah.
is the king of Pluto.
Who was a very serious puppet, the most serious puppet of the group.
Absolutely. He was not just the king of Pluto, but the king of all 8 puppets.
Oh, yes. That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was scary because he sounds like benevolent and loving, but he ruled with an iron fist and truly
Literally.
like tyrannical.
Yes.
It was
It was a rocket-powered fist that he could that he would just fire off at anybody who opposed him, and
Yeah.
it would return to him.
But he wasn't anticipating how immune to being punched in the face Quimby was. Because he had his whole life been punching himself in the face. And so King Goofy sends the rocket-powered fist at Quimby and hits him in the face. And Quimby's like, little do you know, I have spent the last few years building up an immunity to rocket punch face.
or in his words,
Yes. It had translation below it, which inspired The Princess Bride. So, another parallel
Wow.
inspiration. Yeah. Crazy.
and so
It's really unfortunate that the Mellish family is relegated to just being a traveling trapeze artist family.
In the
Because really,
1700s. Yeah.
yeah. Well, no, they're still descendants of them to this day. They founded the Cirque du Soleil.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I'm sorry. How could I forget that?
Sometimes you just need to talk about it, and then it becomes true.
Yeah.
Right, right. And, you know, having like the Ice King, I guess it's appropriate that he be the Ice King because he had a very, very cold heart.
Oh, the Ice King.
Yeah.
Goofy.
We
Ice.
haven't gotten to
Goofy was the Ice King, was he not?
No.
No, the Ice King on
Actual Ice
Mars.
King. On Mars?
Yeah, but we'll get to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's a few planets away still.
Yeah. Right now we're still on the King of Puppets, the King of Pluto, Goofy the Duck,
Goofy the Duck.
who
The duck puppet.
whose Iron Fist
His Iron Fist
was
rocket punch.
was completely ineffective against Quimby.
Mm-hmm.
So
But he respected him more for it,
yeah.
and this actually brought them closer together in a platonic way.
Yeah.
Way.
that's correct. Which is great because Quimby had a small bomb made of plutonium in his pocket that he was about to throw.
As
at
most
Goofy.
5-year-olds do.
yeah.
Well, most 5-year-olds
Stick everything in their
who
pockets.
reverse fart their way to Pluto. Yes.
Whose puberty is offset and starts at age 5.
Yes, and has created his own language that is very inaudible.
Typical 5-year-old stuff.
I mean, Kyle, you had a 5-year-old once. This is pretty par for the course, right?
Well, luckily, my daughter did not go through puberty and sprout body hair and all that stuff.
No beard?
Well, no beard.
No. Okay. Probably for the best, actually.
I just meant more like carrying around plutonium bombs and stuff like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
As you do, I mean, you do live very close to LA, so it's pretty chaotic.
Yeah, that's
there, right?
true. And, you know, kids are kids and, you know, they go through these crazy fads. You know, it's like, hey, let's sneak into the nuclear power plant and steal plutonium and take it to Mrs. Garber's class the next day. And yeah, that
Poor
became
Mrs.
a thing
Garber.
for a few years.
Yeah, may
gotta
she
deal
rest
with a
in
lot.
peace.
No, she's retired to Florida.
Yeah, it's very
She's
peaceful.
resting.
Well,
Peaceful there.
her left frontal lobe, maybe. I mean,
We were trying to sugarcoat it for the listeners.
No
but-
going back now.
Yeah, she did. But back to the book.
So King Goofy lays his crown at the feet of Quimby because he decides he can't be king after having been defeated by such a noble opponent.
Right. So that makes Quimby the new king of Pluto.
Yeah.
Ergo, the new king of puppets. And this is about the halfway point of the book. Mm-hmm. But before we continue on with that, I would like to take a quick minute to do an ad break. So, this week's podcast is sponsored by the Fielding Mellish family of trapeze artists who totally exist.
Yeah.
It's also brought to you by punching yourself in the face, which is a good way to build up immunity for being punched in the face.
and duct tape. DUCK. Duct tape. Brought to you and inspired by Goofy.
It's also brought to you by the 1731 headphone jetpack suit. Buy it now with 0.5% APR financing.
I also would like to point out the duct tape is brought to you by Goofy the dog from Disney. This episode is also brought to you by the website www.quimbitapes/ducttape/com. And if you go to that website and enter in promo code TUBC they will send you a free pair of butt reverse fart headphones made of duct tape.
But
That is so awesome.
It's a novelty item, and we repeat, please do not try to reverse fart it up your butt.
And if you do, keep it off
liability.
Keep it off of Vine.
Yeah.
Yes. So back to the book.
So those are our sponsors. Yeah.
So like I mentioned, that's about the halfway point. Now he has to travel to the remaining 7 planets, not including Earth.
Yeah. He goes to Neptune.
That is his next stop, is Neptune. I'm not 100% certain if that was his next stop in order, but that's where he went.
But Neptune's got that. Well, so Pluto's special effect was it made all inanimate objects animate, but Neptune, its special power was turning everything, at least temporarily, into a cartoon. And so everything suddenly became two-dimensional and way over the top.
Right. Neptune has a ring around it, right?
Yeah.
Well,
It's like a vertical ring. Well, I
if
mean,
it doesn't
space,
currently,
everything's different angles
it did
anyways,
back then. Yeah. I know Jupiter has one, but I believe
Saturn's the main one, but Neptune does have rings.
Okay.
Just not
well,
as many.
anyway, little known fact that Quimby discovered was that the rings around Neptune, or at least that were around Neptune in the 1700s, look it up, were actually giant projector screens.
Oh.
Which allowed everything to become a two-dimensional animated object.
Yeah. Yep.
Very interesting.
Look it up.
Yeah. This is where Donald, the
dog.
Dog.
was residing in his society
Of
alone.
of
cartoon rocks and
tumbleweeds.
But
tumbleweeds.
he would like a child playing, he would make voices and characters for the little rocks and things and
Tumbleweed.
and act out his own little cartoons.
Actually, Kyle, I believe you also narrated this part in the book.
Oh, did I?
In the audiobook, at least in the English version. I think the Japanese version as well.
Actually, you also did the German version, but you can pick whichever language you'd like to give us a little taste of.
Well, I can give you a taste of all three. You know, the
Excellent.
German version is, and then the Japanese version.
To this day, I just want to mention, to this day, that is still what I hear whenever I see a tumbleweed.
Right. And then the Japanese version was.
That's whatever I hear when I see a tumbleweed.
A Japanese tumbleweed. Yeah.
Right.
Japan is known for their tumbleweeds.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
And
Look it up.
I've actually got all the awards here, trophies and awards on display here at my place that I've won from my English performance, which was more akin to.
Because King Donald actually was fluent in Quimbish.
That's correct.
So Quimby was able to land on Neptune and immediately
Established
talk to him.
diplomacy.
Yeah.
And also gained Donald's crown.
Yeah.
And then he left that planet
Immediately.
and on to Mars, where the Ice King resides.
Oh, he didn't. He skipped Uranus. I could have sworn there was a
back
ring
to
around
Uranus.
Uranus.
He comes back, but he wanted to save Uranus for last
Well,
because it was gonna be a tough job.
Extremely platonic, though.
Yes.
It's real hard to get out of Uranus once you're in there.
As fact, as
Especially
he
with
traveled
headphones.
past it, he actually said, Kyle, if you would, which Yes, which roughly translated to "I'll be back for Uranus later."
Yep.
Right.
It's quite the children's book.
So he goes to Mars.
He goes to Mars and he actually creates what we've heard about. Oh, the world famous face on Mars. Quimby actually drew that or carved it out of the stone there.
He did. He carved it out of the 3.5 millimeter headphone jack from his rocket ship phones.
Well, it was interesting because this is after his father had passed away. Very discreetly, they never really go into much detail about what happened, but he designed the face in honor of his father.
Yeah.
And tried to carve it in his likeness.
Right, which was interesting because Quimbor had not yet passed away at that point, but he will very soon.
Yes.
That would explain my confusion, yes.
Which brings us to the Ice King.
Yes, Kyle, if you would.
Well, the Ice King was sensing that this huge rebellion by all the puppets was about to happen, and he assumed that Quimby was the leader of this rebellion. It's like, this ain't going down, yo.
Which he picked up from the DJ.
Yeah.
Yes.
He did. He learned some vernacular from the hip hop DJ that traveled time to the 1700s.
Yes.
So Quimby, picking up on this puppet's affinity for the hip hop, started breakdancing.
The Ice King had never seen anything like that before. It melted his heart, which of course killed him because he was made of ice.
Yes.
The ice
Yes.
puppet. He was an ice puppet.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. We know he's a puppet. That was established.
But
Yeah.
he wasn't an ice guy.
Not a nice guy.
He was not a nice guy anymore because he was now dead. But of course, he saw Quimby as the leader of the puppets, but he did not see himself as subordinate to him. But the breakdancing again melted his heart, and so Quimby then took that crown as well.
He was, and that was great English there, Steve.
No, that was Quimbish.
I was Quimbish, yeah. It was not intentional, but it happened. But he wore all the crowns just on top of each other. Every time he'd get a new crown, he'd just stack it up
Well,
there.
that's the reason why he did the planets in the order that he did, was because the crown,
Yeah, he was doing the
Pluto
crowns by
crown
size.
is the largest, and then each planet
Right,
from there
right.
in a specific order goes down by size. So it's like the ring stacking game. You got to get the crowns in the right order.
Of course.
With Uranus being the best for last.
Yeah, Uranus is the
Well, the
smallest.
Uranus
Little
is
crown.
the smallest and the
It's
hardest
like a
to
little,
penetrate.
Little ring, tight little puckered kind of crown.
It's a balloon knot.
Never heard of a crown being called puckered before.
Well,
This is a singular crown.
Mellish had a gift with words.
Yeah, he really
Yeah.
did. So
Among his
inspirational.
many other gifts.
So, of course, from Mars on to Jupiter.
Meanwhile, every time he leaves a planet, he goes into the back room and records a little documentary on how it's gone.
Yeah.
Yes,
A
because
little
every planet has a little back room.
No, on his spaceship.
Yes, that's what I meant. Because when the spaceship is on the planet, that
The
planet
planet
now
has
has a back room.
Yeah,
room,
exactly.
yeah.
Okay, yeah, we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So from Mars, obviously, he went next
To Jupiter, as I just said.
to Jupiter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
As you did just say.
It's the next smallest crown.
And on Jupiter, there was all the puppets had buried underground and had started an underground society.
In the
So
center of the big red dot, I hear.
that's correct.
Yeah.
So Quimby was walking around the surface of Jupiter, just searching, but he couldn't find anybody. And of course, Quimbor had been with him this whole time up to that point. We didn't mention that because the book doesn't mention that, but it mentions it right now.
Yeah.
So,
Quimbor's downfall came from the Ice King, but he didn't actually die until he was on Jupiter.
that's right. Well, because Quimby he felt something in him. to carve that face of his dad, he had a little bit of a premonition that maybe there should be a monument to his father, because while they're looking for all the underground puppets and can't find them, Quimbor suffers a heart attack due to the lack of oxygen because he was not wearing a spacesuit this whole time, and it had finally caught up with him.
Yeah.
So he dies, and Quimby quickly fashions a shovel out of duct tape, and as he's digging a grave for his dear old pop, there he sees a puppet,
Yes.
also known as a puppet.
But that's what they're called on Jupiter. Puppets are
Puppets.
puppets on Jupiter. Yeah.
That's correct.
Well, that was part of Jupiter's special ability when you land on that planet, is you no longer can speak normally.
That's right. This was the very sad part of the book that we mentioned earlier. Kyle, I know you in particular were pretty choked up about this. Are you okay to share your experience with the burial?
I think I cried for like 3 whole seconds, but it was the most intense.
I'm sorry to hear that.
3 seconds of sadness that was so real. That I think Mellish really, really tapped into that raw emotion there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I couldn't even come outside and face the world. I was just distraught for that intense amount of time.
Now, you've read this book many times throughout your adult life, yes?
Oh God. Yeah. Yeah. I even started to read the unabridged version.
Oh. Well, we don't need to, that's for another time. I forgot that this was the abridged version.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there was only 2 copies of the unabridged version created, and Kyle owns both of them and won't give them up.
And they're both in Russian.
Well, it's a little known fact that Kyle's fluent in Russian.
Yes.
Is probably something he should let his agent know about, but
which is a little
probably be
surprising.
working more.
Yeah. Well, they didn't ask you to do the Russian audiobook, though. They got you like the German and the Japanese and the English one.
Well, that's because this book is banned in Russia.
Oh, yeah. I did not
Well, they
know
also
that,
want
actually.
authentic, not like Boris Badenov or something.
We'll
you know?
see.
That's true. But I was going to say
Yeah.
that this book has been, which is why you chose it, as had a real emotional attachment to you throughout your life. I believe this was actually the inspiration for some of your performances in Dragon Ball Z.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think, Ox King was certainly chiseled from, the meat of this story. So when I go around and, say, oh, Chi-Chi, that screams Mellish to me.
Oh yeah. I mean, that was basically the embodiment of Quimbor.
Yeah, Quimbor was like, I mean, if you had to just embody the Ox King, Quimbor was it.
And you brought those notes up with Funimation, I believe, when you were doing the dub, right? So,
well, they did have to negotiate not only for the rights from Japan, but with the Mellish estate, which of course has been struck from public record, at least as far as a lot of people, because the Mellish people were very, very, very private.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Except for their Cirque du Soleil shows.
It's true, but we don't want to talk too much inside baseball here. I just thought that was a nice insight into why you picked this book, because it's clearly had not only a profound inspiration in your personal career, but in the career of clearly everyone on the planet.
Yes.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, people like to say that, oh, it all goes back to aliens building the pyramids and everything. Like, no, I think it started with, time traveling hip hop DJs in the 1700s.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's really no more of a universal truth than that.
So should we get back to the book for a minute?
Please.
For a minute or two, yeah.
I guess this is the point where, so he's shoveled into Jupiter and exposed the puppets. And that was what they were called there, because everything sounds
puppets.
different. And the reason for that is because Jupiter is a gas giant, and a lot of that gas, I believe, is helium. And so when Quimby exposed the puppets, he's like, and it was higher pitched than normal, and the puppets started laughing at him, and he befriended them immediately. just out of sheer hilarity.
Yeah.
That is exactly what happened in the book, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they name him the Jester. And then he steals the crown.
Just takes it.
Because, jesters are scamps and they do what they want.
And they didn't even know he was stealing it. They thought it was part of a bit, and they're just laughing away. And
So he runs off. He's about to take off to leave Jupiter. But before that, he leaves a little duct tape cross on his dad's burial space.
Yeah. And films a quick audio diary.
And he leaves that audio
an audio diary.
Yep.
Yes.
That's
Okay, let's go with it.
That's what the book says.
Don't question it, Steve. That's what it says.
So he films that quick audio diary, and he re-digs up his father, puts the audio diary
In his hands.
videotape in. Well, what it was is and this was actually the inspiration for YouTube, is that he just took the audio and he put a video over it that was just the cover of his audio tape, like the cover art for his audio tape.
Dad.
So that later on, when the internet was established, they could put that up so people could listen to it, like while doing dishes on their computer or whatever. But it would still be on the world's leading video platform.
Yes.
That's pretty amazing.
All of this was explained, yeah.
That he throws the dirt back on it, and nobody ever found it anyway. But he
Right,
was-
and then Quimby had this. This was like an action scene out of Hollywood. He's like, "Oh crap! I don't have enough gas to put the headphone jack up my butt and propel across time and space again." But because Jupiter is a gas giant, he was able to harness that energy.
He actually got the energy because the spot that he had chosen to bury Quimbor, just out of lucky happenstance, was the very source of the gas giant.
Yeah.
And so he just kind of plugged in,
And it was
charged up.
With the headphone
It was a
jack.
vein of methane.
Yeah, with a 3.5 millimeter jack.
Yeah.
And so he plugged in there. For anybody listening, that was on our end. There is not a giant truck chasing you down in your car if you happen to be listening in your car. And if there is, well, at least this is the last thing you get to hear. So,
Jesus.
Rest in Florida.
so he, so he plugs the 3.5 millimeter head jack into
the
Jupiter,
methane.
charges up, takes off as the entire planet explodes.
Yeah.
Puppets and all.
Puppets and all.
Puppets.
And
And he heads to the
of course, in our real world, Jupiter likely still exists, but it's uncertain because the amount of time it would take for us to see the explosion may not have caught up with us yet. So we may find out in another couple hundred years that it in fact isn't there.
Yes,
Look it up.
That's how light works.
So
All right, I'm just going to let that one go.
this is what the book said. I didn't
I
write
know,
the book.
That's fair enough.
I'm not making this stuff up.
Yeah.
This is science by Mellish,
Mellish science.
Yeah, so
which is actually taught in many universities.
from there he goes to the fifth planet, which is, of course, Mercury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he just finds the crown laying there. No puppets.
It was very
so he-
close to the sun. I think the puppet probably just burnt up.
It's just
That's-
too hot there.
It's a liability for wooden puppets.
But of course, the crown was made out of the most indestructible element known to man,
Not Mercury, though.
tinfoil.
Yeah.
So he took that crown and he left.
Yeah. It was
That was-
easy. Added it to his little stack and...
Well, the nice thing is that the crown didn't exactly fit, but he just kind of crunched it up into a ball and threw it in the middle.
Yeah, it was great. So he's got the crown from Mercury.
So the nice thing is that tinfoil is not a great conductor of heat, so the sun didn't really affect it.
Yeah.
He could still touch it with his bare hands. Just like if you can pull tinfoil out of the oven, and you'll be fine.
It's true.
It is true.
Fun facts with Will Wood.
It is actually true.
I know.
Not if
I
it's
agree.
like covering a cookie sheet. Don't pick it up then. But just the tinfoil itself. Anyway, back to the book. The sixth planet, Kyle.
Yeah. On from Mercury now to Venus.
That is one of the other planets left. Yes.
That is one of those left. And Venus was her name. She's got it. Yeah, baby.
Yes.
She's got it.
Venus was a sentient planetoid with also a face, but this one wasn't carved in, it just was. And so when Quimby sort of farted around the surface of Venus, the face of the goddess Venus spoke to him. And sorry, I forget exactly what he said, but Kyle, you've read this book much, so you must remember.
I know what ultimately became Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, which is, of course, it's,
Look, if Mellish is gonna, yeah, look it up. If Mellish is is credited for creating the entire hip hop movement, then of course he also would be the inspiration for Rapper's Delight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah,
the
because the
lyrics.
gas from Jupiter, the gas giant, it's got to run out at some point, and then what's left to do but rap? Really?
That's true.
That's how I live my life, so it makes sense.
Which is also the inspiration for the Jamiroquai song Dance. Or is it just Dance? Because nothing left to do but dance, or in this case, rap.
Yeah.
But enough about pop culture. Let's go back to Venus. So after she finishes, after they finish the rap battle between Quimby and the goddess Venus, Venus loses because Quimby pulled out his own language, started rapping in that language, which, Kyle, you narrated that. So if you could just give us a little. And it was those last notes there that activated her defeat.
Defeat mode activated.
And she also blew up.
Just the whole planet.
Yeah, but what was left in the rubble of the planet was her crown.
Yeah, it went flying straight into Quimby's hand.
And he grabbed that all badass and added it to the collection.
I said, "Booyah!"
Yeah, and then he slightly tripped, but nobody was around to see it.
Yeah. I found it interesting that, like, considering all these puppets that had traveled around the planets, there was none to be found on Venus either.
Well, the goddess had eaten them.
Ah, yes.
And so it really was that she had become the puppet.
Right. Mm-hmm. Oh, but aren't we all in a little way? That's
No.
getting too deep. Yeah.
No, we're not.
Yes, I am a goddess.
Ha, touche. Well played.
So Saturn, from Venus to Saturn,
Yeah.
and that is where the horror elements of this book come up.
Yeah. Because Saturn, the entire surface of the planet was covered in spiders wearing snakes for hats.
Yes, and each one of them, in each of their 8 legs, had a butterfly knife.
Well, except for the last 2 legs because they walked on them.
yeah, they
So
were.
they had 6 butterfly knives and then 2 legs for walking.
and they
Yes.
walked fully upright, which was
Yeah.
terrifying on its
Terrifying.
own.
But on each of those 2 remaining legs, they had stomping boots
Oh, yeah.
for curb
And-
stomping.
The snakes in their grasped in their tails had another butterfly knife. So 7 butterfly knives.
Well, they actually
2 stomping boots and snake fangs.
You got that a little bit wrong. They actually, each of the snakes was grasping another spider with another 6 butterfly knives.
Right. Yeah.
So at first, Quimby was like, nope.
Just going to pass
He's
this
like-
planet right on by.
I hate snakes and spiders.
And I especially hate snakes that equip knife-wielding spiders. And I don't
ultimately
like
became
much for
General
being
Grievous.
curb stomped.
yeah.
Of course, that was the translation.
The inspiration for General Grievous, yeah.
Yes, that was the inspiration for General Grievous from Star Wars.
Yeah.
Again, Lucas, like many others, had a copy of this book. Well, about 52 other people had a copy of this book.
Yeah.
But Kyle is still in possession of the only 2 unabridged versions, and he's still
I'm
ain't
not
giving
giving
them
them up. No way.
No, why would you?
Exactly.
It's pretty much the culmination of your life's goal was to track down the 2 copies of that book, and you did it.
They're worth millions.
I did. You know, some poor schmuck on eBay out in Arkansas. You know, he stupidly put it up for like 53 cents, and I bid on. I did a buy it now, and it came like with express shipping, came like right away, and I knew that I hit gold.
Yeah,
that's right. And, you know, coming to that end of that galactic journey, it really had a lot of social commentary, and again, it just tugged at the heartstrings. It's such a pivotal work, not only in Mellish's world, but our own.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I would like to just mention really quickly about Saturn there, just how that got resolved, because the famous term "kill it with fire" was also coined there, because that's what Quimby did. Now, a lot of people don't think you can have fire in space, and they would be factually correct.
But you technically can't have spiders and snakes in space either without oxygen. But
exactly.
Hey.
Yeah.
So that's where he took his plutonium bomb, threw it at Saturn, and erupted the whole thing in fire from the plutonium, because science.
That's how it works.
And at the very end of it, unfortunately,
sci-truth.
He burned up the crown as well. Sorry, you were going to say something, Steve?
Yeah. I mean, as all the spiders and snakes were burning, they were turning into small puppets. And it turned out that as this was on Saturn, right?
Yes.
That all the main puppet that had landed there had multiplied ad nauseum to all these other puppets. But because it was a horror planet, they'd all turned into werewolves. And based on all the moons of Saturn, they were constantly in full moonlight. And so as they were burning up, it turned out he just wiped out a whole population of helpless puppets that could do nothing more than become snake-wielding spiders.
Yeah.
By day.
You said werewolves.
By night.
Spiders.
Were-spiders.
Yeah.
You're right.
Well, they were spiders by
Lycanthropes
day,
of some sort.
but they were werewolves
They
by
were
night.
spiders who wear snakes.
It's such a poignant commentary on racist and classist engagements,
movements,
and the political intrigue and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean also just very poignant for today, which is a lot of people feel with how messed up things have got and Trump in power and everything. We should probably just burn it all down. And that's what he did. But he burned up the crown as well. So he just hoped nobody would notice that.
Well, he picked up some ash and used his snot to kind of form it into a crown shape and put that up
Probably
on top.
could have just used some duct tape, but
Well, he used the last of it on Quimbor's grave.
yeah, you're right. I missed that part.
So then from there, of course, he goes to his last stop, Uranus, which he had saved. He had saved for last. Punching Judy, the traveling puppet show. Yes. Which is where the big, as we said earlier, this very important for the end of the book.
Yes.
Yeah, it was like a Mike Tyson match. It was really interesting to see the boxing gloves come out and, you know, and then all the various puppets are placing wagers. It's just...
Yeah.
Well, they were waging plutonium bombs, and
Which
that was
are
also
a lot more common than you would expect.
that was also the inspiration for the Cold War.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. The Cold
could I
War
forget
was
that?
inspired by a book.
Yeah, because they were just stockpiling nuclear weapons, but not doing anything with them. Essentially, it was a bet for which side would win, but ultimately they gave up because they got bored, just like the Cold War.
Yes.
Look it up.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all there. Wikipedia.
So, Punching Judy, which is not a person, but in fact an entire traveling show.
Not a person.
Yeah.
I was under the impression through the entire book that Punching Judy was a person.
Well,
Or a puppet.
yes, but Punching Judy, we mentioned this in the beginning, is the name of the puppet show.
Yeah.
Right. I thought it was both. Oh,
What
man, I
they
was
do
confused. My bad.
is it's 16 smaller puppets that form into one large puppet, and they put on a show by bringing out the boxing gloves and punching you. And that's what they were betting on.
That
They
was the inspiration for the Power Rangers.
Yes.
And Voltron.
And Voltron, yeah.
And possibly Gundam.
And possibly Transformers.
And Reboot. So they were, as Kyle mentioned, they were putting wagers on these plutonium bombs on who would win between Punching Judy, the traveling puppet
16-person
show,
puppet.
sentient amalgamation of ass kick,
And
versus Quimby,
Yeah.
the king of the puppets, of Pluto, of Venus, of Mars, of Jupiter, Neptune,
Mercury.
Mercury, but not.
Well, Saturn wasn't
Not
around
yet
anymore.
Uranus.
Yeah, Saturn wasn't around anymore, and not yet Uranus.
Quimby had not conquered Uranus at this point.
No, but he was eager to jump in. So
He took a fist
Where are you going with this?
and he...
well, this is where the book went with it.
Yeah. He took his fist and he punched Punching Judy.
She didn't see that coming.
No. Why would she?
Because she's
she'd
been
only
all-
ever seen him hitting himself.
Yeah, exactly.
But he had, again, his nervous tick had given him an advantage in that he had been punching all his life. So that was one spectacular punch.
Well, that's what happened because he had, as Kyle mentioned before, he had the piece of duct tape as a memory taping his arm down, but he took that tape off, and the arm just just came right out.
Yeah.
Gave one hell of a punch because that punch had been built up for
5 years.
Give or take.
Yes, for 5 years. His entire life, that punch had been waiting to come out. And there it was.
When the time is right, you'll know.
And Punching Judy dissipated into 16 smaller shocked puppets. And they all bowed down to Quimby and said, "We salute you." As they were bowing, they said they saluted him.
So
Which is the inspiration for the salute and the bow.
and then they
Not of
used
the boat,
their
but like the physical bow.
Or the stern.
Yeah.
they used their powers of forming things to form a crown, a teeny tiny crown.
The pucker crown.
Yeah, the little pucker
Which
crown.
was made of 16 little puppets.
They formed a crown shape, a larger crown shape, and then they expelled all of their moisture to all like sort of shrivel up and pucker up into the teeny little crown,
Right.
Because they wanted to make sure they would fit on top of
And
the,
they wanted
the
to get
stack of crowns.
the prongs on the crown, so
Yeah.
they each put up their middle fingers.
Yeah,
So it was just a big
It earned
FU.
its name as it's known through history as the brown eye.
Yes. And that actually is what Quimby became to known was Brown Eye the Wise.
Yeah.
yeah. So he took that little puckered crown and he put it on top.
And as soon as he did, he was transported back to Earth.
Yeah, it was the magical key in order to return home.
Yeah. His father still very dead.
Yes, and he was now an orphan.
Yeah, so they took him and they put him with his count guardian, and that was the inspiration for Lemony Snicket's A Series of Unfortunate Events, which you can catch on Netflix
And
right now.
Count Chocula as well.
So I found this is where I found that the book took a huge turn for me. Was when he gets back home and he's completely alone. He doesn't know what to do, and he turns on the television, and sure enough, what does he see? But it's PSTV, and it stood for Puppet Space Television, And there was all his videotapes that they'd been uploading it and watching it and spreading it across the galaxy
Yeah.
like a real life Truman Show. And he had no idea he was the star of the show.
He was a
which,
celebrity.
of course, was the inspiration for the Truman Show.
Yep.
Yeah,
and
that
he
was like
was forced to watch
epic
that from
finale.
his orphanage.
Right?
And
And that's where he died.
that's where he died. And on his tombstone it read, "Surely these are the Quimby Tapes."
And then the hip hop DJ time traveled one last time and DJ'd the funeral and inscribed the words "wiggity wiggity whack" on the headstone.
Yep.
I like that he spoken word the Rapper's Delight lyrics again in honor of him without music or anything. Just got up there and started speaking them.
That's
It's
right.
very touching.
Like I said, this is probably the most important book in human history. And I'm glad that you were here to share this with us, Kyle.
Yeah.
Oh, it's my pleasure, and I am so glad that this podcast exists to help spread the word about the importance of this, and that history is doomed to repeat itself unless we look into our past.
Well, we like to think that we do the brown-eyed ones work here.
Yes.
Oh my.
So yeah, again, thank you very much, Kyle. Hopefully we'll have you back sometime in the future.
Well, I hope so, because, I'm not really much of a reader, but I do have some fascinating stories that still sit on my bookshelf that we can certainly delve into and examine.
Well, I'm curious what other ones you've managed to buy off Arkansas's eBay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be very fascinated to take a look at that library.
Steve, you have a bit of a history with being invited to people's libraries, so you better keep your guard up. And also, thank you, Kyle. We would love to hear more from you and your library in the future. And of course, we didn't start a book club podcast to read any goddamn book. So thank you all for listening to the Totally Unreal Book Club podcast, our weekly review podcast in association with the Voices of Anarchy, of which everyone here, except for Kyle Hebert, our very special guest, is also a member. You can check us out at www.voicesofanarchy.com or on Twitter at voicesanarchy. You can find the podcast on podcast services around the globe, and you can support the podcast on patreon.com/tubcpodcast. That's TUBC podcast on Twitter and Instagram at TUBC podcast, and you can literally just find us everywhere else at TUBC podcast. I want to thank once again the panel this week, and you can follow each of us on our personal Twitters at
Caitlionroar.
Steve Marriott.
At Kyle Hebert, which is Hebert. Don't spell it Herbert.
I said a hip hop, a hippie to the hippie.
Hip hip hop and you don't stop the rocket.
Is that your new text tone?